2 years ago, Israel Adesanya was one of the most feared, most celebrated, most dominant fighters in the history of the UFC. An undefeated run at middleweight. Championship defenses that looked almost effortless. A striking style so technically advanced that analysts ran out of superlatives trying to describe it. Today, Adesanya is on a 4-fight losing streak. He is ranked number 8 at middleweight, in his own division, a division he used to rule completely. And on Saturday at UFC Baku, a fighter who has never held a UFC belt, who is not ranked in the top 10, who lost his previous fight by submission, called Adesanya out publicly. Not because the callout was crazy, but because, based on where both men are right now, it makes sense. Tonight, what happened to the Last Stylebender? How does one of the greatest champions in UFC history end up here? And is there a way back? Let's establish who Israel Adesanya was at his peak, because the contrast with where he is now is the entire story. Born in Nigeria, raised in New Zealand. A professional kickboxer before MMA, who brought a striking game to the middleweight division that was unlike anything the weight class had seen. His movement was different. Most MMA strikers move in straight lines, forward, backward, side to side. Adesanya moved in curves, in circles, constantly changing the angle and the distance, making it almost impossible for opponents to time his strikes or find their own rhythm. His counter-striking was elite. He did not need to initiate. He was most dangerous when opponents came at him, because he could read their intentions, create angles, and land clean shots on the way in. He won the UFC middleweight title. He defended it multiple times. He went up to light heavyweight to challenge Jan Blachowicz for the belt, the only blemish on an otherwise perfect record at that point. He came back to middleweight and continued his dominance. His loss to Strickland in September 2023 was shocking, not just because he lost, but because of how he lost. Adesanya did not look like Adesanya. And the question of whether we were seeing a bad night or the beginning of a decline became the central debate in UFC middleweight conversation. We now have enough data to answer that question. The Sean Strickland fight was the beginning of the end of Adesanya's dominance. And it is worth spending time on because it introduced stylistic vulnerabilities that his subsequent opponents identified and exploited. Strickland's approach was pressure-based, high-volume, straight-line striking. He walked Adesanya down. He did not give him the space and the distance that Adesanya's game requires. Adesanya's counter-striking relies on range management. When opponents respect the range, stay at distance, and engage cautiously, Adesanya can pick them apart. When opponents walk through that range and force close quarters exchanges, the picture changes. Strickland forced that close quarters environment for 5 rounds. And Adesanya, who had always been able to reset the distance against previous opponents, could not reset it against Strickland's pressure. The other element was Adesanya's output. He landed fewer significant strikes than Strickland over 5 rounds. A man known for his technical precision was outworked in volume by a fighter whose entire game is built on high output. Whether this was age, ring rust, preparation issues, or simply a genuinely difficult stylistic matchup, the result was the same. Adesanya lost his belt. Strickland was the new champion. And the blueprint for beating Adesanya had been written. The rematch theory for Adesanya got complicated when Dricus du Plessis defeated Strickland and became the new middleweight champion. Adesanya then fought du Plessis and lost again. Du Plessis represents a different kind of problem for Adesanya than Strickland did. Where Strickland is primarily a boxer with volume and pressure, du Plessis adds wrestling and grappling to that pressure. He can take the fight to different domains. He can bring it to the ground. He can work in the clinch. Against du Plessis, Adesanya's ability to manage range was again compromised. The South African champion's aggression and willingness to engage in a chaotic, multi-dimensional fight took Adesanya out of the controlled, technical striking exchange, where he is most dangerous. 2 losses, 2 different fighters, 2 similar strategic problems. The pattern was becoming clear. The Nassourdine Imavov fight was perhaps the most alarming of Adesanya's losing streak, because Imavov is not in the same tier of recognizable names as Strickland or du Plessis. Imavov is a French-Algerian middleweight, talented, physical, capable, but not a former champion. not a pound-for-pound contender. For Adesanya to lose to Imavov was a signal that whatever was happening was not about specific stylistic matchups. It was something more fundamental. Imavov used similar tools, pressure, physicality, willingness to engage aggressively, and they worked. Again, 3 losses in a row. And now the question was not just whether Adesanya could recapture the title. It was whether Adesanya was still competitive at the level the top 15 of the middleweight division represents. The Joe Pyfer loss completed the 4-fight skid and answered the questions about competitiveness in the most emphatic way possible. Pyfer stopped Adesanya, a finish. A fight that ended inside the distance. For a man who had historically been extremely durable and extremely difficult to hurt cleanly, a stoppage loss carried significant weight. Pyfer is a finisher, aggressive, powerful, relentless forward pressure. Exactly the profile of the fighters who have been giving Adesanya problems throughout this run. After the Pyfer loss, Adesanya found himself ranked number 8 in a division he spent years at the very top of. Below fighters he likely would have beaten at his peak. A name that still carries enormous commercial value, but a competitive standing that has been genuinely compromised. Now let's talk about the Abus Magomedov callout from UFC Baku, because it is a perfect reflection of Adesanya's current standing in the sport. Magomedov is a good fighter, he is experienced, he has wins over notable opponents, but he is not, by any measure, the kind of fighter who would have been realistically calling out Adesanya 2 years ago. At that point, Adesanya was the champion. Calling him out was the exclusive territory of the top 3 or 4 contenders. Now, Magomedov calls him out from a position that most analysts consider reasonable. That shift from untouchable champion to realistic target for a fighter outside the top 10 is the story of Adesanya's last 2 years told in a single callout. The personal dimension adds texture. Magomedov's motivation stems from Adesanya being unable to remember his name during a media interview. The fact that this slight, which was almost certainly not intentional, just a reflection of Adesanya not being closely familiar with Magomedov's career, has fueled Magomedov for what appears to be years of motivation, is genuinely interesting. It is a reminder that inside every fighter is a person who notices and remembers every perceived slight, every dismissal, every moment of being overlooked. Let's address the most important question. Is there a realistic path back for Israel Adesanya? The honest answer is complicated. The case for a comeback. He is 35 years old, not ancient for a combat sports athlete. His striking technique does not disappear because of a losing streak. He is still a former champion with the kind of IQ and training base that can be rebuilt upon. Fighters have come back from worse losing streaks to find competitive success. The case against 4 consecutive losses, with the most recent being a finish, suggests a decline that goes beyond matchup problem. The fundamental issue, his inability to manage pressure and distance against aggressive opponents in the way he once could, is not easily corrected at 35. If anything, the physical attributes that allowed him to reset distance when he was younger have diminished with age. The path that makes most sense, a carefully chosen return against an opponent who does not present the same pressure-based, volume-heavy problems that his last 4 opponents did. A stylistic matchup that plays to his strengths rather than his current weaknesses. A win to rebuild momentum before anyone puts him back in the title conversation. Retirement is also a legitimate option. He was one of the greatest middleweight champions in UFC history. He has nothing left to prove. There is no shame in recognizing that a chapter has ended. Whatever Adesanya decides, this much is clear. The era of Adesanya as the undisputed king of the middleweight division is over. What comes after that era is the question only he can answer. Here is the bottom line. Israel Adesanya was one of the most dominant fighters in UFC history. A striking technician whose movement, timing, and ring IQ were genuinely singular. He is now on a 4-fight losing streak, ranked number 8 in his own division, being called out by fighters who, 2 years ago, would not have dreamed of thinking they were in his league. The fall is real. The causes are identifiable: age, a recurring stylistic vulnerability, opponents who identified and exploited the blueprint left by Sean Strickland. Whether a comeback is possible is the question the MMA world is genuinely asking. And the answer depends entirely on which version of Adesanya shows up next time he walks into that octagon. Tell me in the comments, do you want to see Adesanya versus Magomedov? And do you think the Last Stylebender has one more great performance left? Subscribe and hit the bell. We track every development in the middleweight division and Adesanya's career as it continues to unfold.